As we all know, the M54 engine is notoriously known for having a crappy coolant system. Everything from the radiator to the thermostat to the water pump to the hoses just explodes. In this case, I'm actually going to be doing some preventative maintenance. I'm going to be replacing the water pump, the thermostat, and the upper and lower radiator hoses because, as we know, when it fails, it'll leave you stranded. Now, on my 325 Xi, that is an E46 with an M54 as well, that did have a water pump leak. The O-ring seal that connected the water pump to the block had actually corroded away so much that it started leaking. And I didn't want to have that, so I had to replace that. Now that I've done that, I felt like doing a precautionary replacement on this E53 X5. This is a 3-liter M54 with a 5-speed transmission. This here is a good example to teach you guys how to do it and why it's important. So let's just start removing stuff and taking out the old parts.
First remove the cowling, then locate the drain pin on the radiator, remove that, and it starts gurgling out. But you gotta remove the top on the reservoir, and then the fluid starts coming out much quicker. There you go, look at that. Then you start doing some disassembly, huh? You're talking about the shroud, the air box, the MF's airflow, and then you can get access to everything you need.
Now before we use our clutch fan tools in order to remove the manual clutch fan, we need to remove the upper radiator hose. That gives us the clearance that we need. So there's 2 clips up here. 1, 2. Go down below. Fan tool in there, and the wrench is also on there. I can now hopefully just give it a quick turn and it should just come loose. Remember, it's reverse thread on the fan. Now we can take the shroud out. Now with the shroud out, we have gobs of room. This is literally like 8 inches. This is great. We gotta remove this pump. But in order to remove the pump, well, guess what? We have to untension the belt, slip the belt over the pump, and that'll free it. This right here is the thermostat housing. So there's an electrical connector that detects whether the thermostat is open or closed right here. And this hose here that goes down to the radiator fan thermostat, the radiator fan temperature, rather. That's the radiator outlet temperature. So this needs to be removed as well. I suspect that there's going to be a lot more coolant that comes out of here, but you know, that's okay. So to loosen the tension on the belt, use the tension or pulley right here, which is an 8mm socket, or an 8mm hex rather, goes right in, and you can see it loosens the entire assembly. So all we need to do now is just take the belt and slip it right off, and that gets us access to the water pump. We can remove the bolts here. Now, I'm not gonna do this by hand, these 4 10mm. I'm just gonna hold it. You can use the belt to hold the tension on the pulley while you actually remove the pulley, but I'm actually just gonna use my hand in order to remove those. So here's the new water pump, and you can see that there are 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this actually does need to be clocked a specific way. You can tell because there's a protrusion right up here. I believe that goes on the side. It goes on the bottom side. I'll show you when we actually install it. But yeah, just the 4 10mm bolts should come out, and the whole assembly should just pop out, and a whole bunch of fluid should come out at the same time. Good old plastic impeller. This pump wasn't in such bad condition though. For the thermostat housing, there are 4, I'm not sure if they're bolts or nuts, but either way, there's 4 of them. You can see that there's some zinc-coated sleeves in there, and those 4 need to be removed before this whole assembly comes out. This already has the thermostat embedded in it, which is great because we just basically remove the old one, clean the surfaces with the gasket already installed, put the new one in. And finally, the lower radiator hose. Just gotta pry it out. All right. So here are all of our new parts. We're gonna be reusing the pulley. We have our pump with our O-ring installed. Good to put a little bit of lube on that, a little bit of grease on that to make the installation a little bit easier. We have our thermostat housing with the new thermostat and switch is already part of all that, which is kind of cool. And the gasket is already infused into the lining. We have a new upper and lower radiator hose, and don't forget to get yourself a new temperature sensor as well that goes into here, because the last thing you want is to reuse the old sensor and have it start to leak out of here and have slow drips coming out of your lower radiator hose. So now we've cleaned up the entire engine and we can start reinstalling the parts. Water pump first. The nub here is on the bottom. Now you can just push it in gently. You can, of course, use a little bit of help from a soft blow hammer, but generally your nuts are going to be the ones that torque them on, and the nuts are torqued to 10 Newton meters. Don't forget about your thermostat connection. And your lower radiator hose. With the switch and the connector. Next is your upper radiator hose. First start at the thermostat housing. Then work your way to the coolant reservoir. Then you reinstall the pulley. First hand tighten the screws. Before we tighten down the water pump pulley, let's get the belt on. Don't forget, now that you've got the belt on, to tighten up those bolts for the pulley. Now we put the radiator shroud back on. And now we have to install the shroud kind of with the fan, because the fan won't fit unless you have the shroud in. So what we'll do is we'll just slip it just like this, backwards in there. Forwards. There we go. Kind of let it sit there for a little bit while we get the shroud on. Okay, now that everything is on, now we can kind of take the fan and spin it on, but you got to kind of spin it backwards, so it's going to be a little bit tricky to get this on. Get the thread started. But it should be possible if you use 2 hands and just do it very carefully.
Now it's just a matter of filling up the coolant, and do it really slow. You gotta let those bubbles escape, so slowly trickle it in. You don't want to go too fast. And then it's just a matter of reinstalling everything else, like the intake, the air filter, you know, the works, the intake stuff, you know, mass airflow, all that good stuff.
So everything is basically back, reassembled. We have our cover for the coolant reservoir. We got to put that on, but I want to make sure that we can start it up and cycle the heat and get everything basically ready to go. Let's give it a start. And immediately you can see we need to add coolant. Now, as I'm adding fluid, slowly, I make sure that the point, that the red level indicator is still being able to come through the funnel. That way, at least I can see it doesn't get stuck. I also have the bleeder screw, which is right on this elbow. I have that open. Once I start seeing fluid come out of that, then I also know that air is mostly purged out of the system and that the level is high enough where I can then close the bleeder, close the top, and then go for a test drive. Now you know how to replace the thermostat and the water pump on your E53 M54 powered BMW. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and talk to you soon. Later.